I'm feeling fairly confident at this point that we can put a fork in the 2025 Baltimore Orioles. So, if this team's not going anywhere this year, the question is, what do they need to do for the rest of this season to make sure they are going places next year? That's coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, May 21st, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to recap what looks like another Orioles loss. I'm actually recording here in the 8th inning, but things are once again not looking good as the Orioles are heading towards dropping 8 in a row. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from this loss to the Brewers, including a somewhat concerning outing from Chase McDermott, another dud on the night offensively, and some interesting Felix Bautista usage from Tony Mansolino that still, like everything the O's have done this year, backfired on them and contributed to their loss. And then we're going to take a longer look at what's going on here. I mean, the Orioles they're about to be 15-32. This seems like too big of a hole to dig out of. So the question becomes, how do you just make this a one-year blip? How do you still turn yourself into a contending team in 2026 and beyond? Even if you're not going to make the playoffs, what do you have to do for the rest of the 2025 season? We'll talk about young players who need to get some serious playing time and what moves the Orioles could make as probably sellers at the trade deadline. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It has not been another fun game of baseball. As I am recording right now, I'm kind of watching live out of the corner of my eye. It is Brewers 4, Orioles 2, with 1 out and a runner on first in the bottom of the 8th inning. Felix Bautista is currently pitching to Caleb Durbin at the moment, and the Orioles are 3 outs away from losing their 8th consecutive game. And I started recording because it looks like that another loss is coming the Orioles' way. And we're going to recap what's happened so far and probably get a live reaction to the ending of this game. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from a game that looks like the 8th consecutive loss for the Baltimore Orioles that would send them to 15-32 through 47 games this year and would officially drop the series to Milwaukee, losing the first 2 before the day game finale coming up here on Wednesday. And the first thing you need to know is Chase McDermott was okay, I guess, in his second outing of the year. McDermott, the Orioles' current number 1 pitching prospect who came over in the Trey Mancini trade at the deadline in 2022. He debuted last year, made 1 big league start against the Marlins. He was so-so, went back down, suffered a shoulder injury, missed the final 6 weeks or so of the season. Came into spring training with not a great path to making the opening day roster, but it would have had a chance with all the injuries the Orioles had, except McDermott was one of those injuries too. Suffered a lat strain early in spring training, shut him down for a while. It took him until mid to late April to even get back on a minor league mound. He started to build himself up from there and was built up enough, and the Orioles needed a starter enough where he started game 2 of the Orioles doubleheader at home against the Twins back on Wednesday. And it wasn't very good. He wasn't very pitch efficient. He allowed 4 runs in 3 innings in that start, which was, of course, another Orioles loss. And he was just called up to be the 27th man for that doubleheader to give them an extra arm, start the game, and then he was immediately sent back down to AAA Norfolk after the game. But the nice part is, if you call up a pitcher to be that extra 27th player you get for a doubleheader, it doesn't count as a true up to the big leagues option back down to the minors, which means you don't have to follow the usual rules in the CBA, which state once you get optioned to AAA, unless you are coming up to replace an injured player, you have to wait a full 15 days as a pitcher before you can come back up to the big leagues. That doesn't count when you're used as the 27th man. So the Orioles could have brought him up really whenever they wanted. And they decided to just keep McDermott on turn. They got a reliever in Cade Stroud up here, replacing Kyle Gibson, to give them an extra reliever for a couple of days. And then they decided that Tuesday would be the day they needed a starter again. It would be regular rest for Chase McDermott. And they brought him to Milwaukee on the taxi squad Monday, activated him to the roster Tuesday. Cade Stroud was optioned back to AAA Norfolk to make room for McDermott, and he got the ball. Now, it wasn't a start this time because the Orioles decided to go with an opener. Keegan Aiken threw a scoreless bottom of the first inning, but then Chase McDermott came out there in a 0-0 game in the bottom of the second. And he wasn't terrible, right? The Brewers didn't blow him up. His final line in technically relief was 4 2/3 innings of 3-run ball. He allowed 4 hits. He struck out 2, allowed 2 home runs. The big issue was he walked 5 Brewers hitters in this game, and that got him into a lot of trouble. And honestly, he was lucky to only give up the 3 runs despite walking 5 and giving up 2 homers. It was a solo homer in the third and a 2-run homer in the fourth, which kind of did the damage to McDermott. He basically was a 2-pitch pitcher in this game. I mean, he throws 5 different pitches in AAA, but he threw 75 pitches in this one. 35 four-seam fastballs, 32 sliders, 7 changeups, 1 sweeper. That was his pitch mix. It was basically four-seam slider, barely tossing in the changeup here and there. The thing is, his four-seamer is great. It's not premium velocity. It's 93 to 95, but it's got huge ride. Again, average 19 inches of induced vertical break. It gets swings and misses. It gets lazy pop-ups. And the slider is a pretty good pitch as well. But the issue is he needs to be throwing and trusting that changeup to be able to get lefties out as well. Both home runs that were hit by left-handed hitters for the Brewers. They just have always seen him much, much better throughout his career. And he has always had command issues. Those obviously showed up when you walk 5 batters in less than 5 innings. But unless you are Spencer Strider, you can't be a 2-pitch pitcher in the major leagues as a starter. You can be it as a reliever. You can't be it as a starter. And while I do think there is a lot of reliever risk down the line for Chase McDermott, I do think he would be a good reliever. The Orioles kind of need him to be a starter, at least here in 2025. And he needs to have the changeup or the sweeper or even the curveball, which it's his number 5 pitch, but he hasn't even thrown it yet in 2 big league outings so far. Like, you got to be able to find at least a 3rd pitch, and I would like for there to be a 4th pitch as a starting pitcher. But alas, here we are. And he's thrown 2 pitches, and they're good, but it makes him predictable. And when he doesn't have good command, he's kind of throwing the fastball in the middle of the plate too much, and the slider is leaking way too far out of the zone for it to be even enticing for a hitter generally to chase it. Even though he gave up fewer runs and pitched deeper into the game in this outing than he did in his start last week, I honestly thought his 3 innings last week in the start were better because the stuff looked better. He racked up more strikeouts. The fastball was more effective. You combine the length and the effectiveness from the 2 outings, and it gets a little bit better, I guess, but that's not really what happened here. So he's going to have to trust that changeup. I would keep him in the rotation, though. Like, Kyle Gibson was DFA'd. At least at this point, it was McDermott who takes his spot in the rotation. He'd be due to start again on Sunday in Fenway Park. That's when the next time in the rotation would come up. They could option him. They could give Trevor Rogers that next start. That's certainly a potential move they could make. They could throw Charlie Morton back into the rotation. That's possible as well. But McDermott's your number 1 pitching prospect. He's big league ready. Just let him figure it out. And especially with the way the season is going, let him figure it out. I would give him the ball again on Sunday. Second thing you need to know is that one of those runs did score because Ramon Laureano got injured on a play. And it felt like another just punch in the gut to the things that have been happening to the Orioles this year. It's the bottom of the 4th inning. Rhys Hoskins leading off. Orioles are trailing 1-0. McDermott makes a good pitch, gets Laureano or Hoskins to pop it up into very shallow right field. Ramon Laureano starting out there on Tuesday, comes in, has it lined up, and then his cleat just gets caught in the turf. He twists his knee, his ankle goes down awkwardly and ends up dropping the ball. They called it a double. I know he got injured, but it still felt like it should have been an error. They called it a double, and that double ended up scoring on a 2-run homer later in the inning, and the run ended up being earned and charged to McDermott as well. Laureano stayed in the game after a long chat with the trainer, then eventually was replaced by Dylan Carlson 1 inning later with what they called an ankle injury, and it looked pretty gnarly. It was kind of crazy. He stayed in the game, was up and walking around, but you would think, Connor, it's Ramon Laureano. He's a bench-type player. If he misses a little bit of time, it's fine. But Ramon Laureano's been the Orioles' best hitter recently. I mean, Yeah, it was nice that Dylan Carlson came in for him, and Carlson had an infield single in the 8th for his first hit as an Oriole, so that was nice to see. But Laureano's been great. I talked about it on yesterday's episode. He's had like a 150 WRC plus over the last month after he got a slow start to this season. But specifically lately, the last 5 games coming into Tuesday, Laureano's 11 for 19 in his last 5 games entering Tuesday. I mean, he has been red hot. That's why he keeps hitting 4th and 5th in this Oriole lineup, because it's like, well, nobody else is hitting. Might as well throw Ramon Laureano in there. And now if you're going to lose him, it's just another thing. And with Tyler O'Neill already on the injured list, obviously Colton Cowser is still on the injured list, although the plan is for him to start a rehab assignment today. So he's maybe a week or two away from coming back to the big leagues, probably 2 weeks away. So that's a really good sign. But with O'Neill and Cowser on the injured list, if Laureano has to hit the IL too with some sort of ankle issue here, I mean, yeah, you already have Dylan Carlson here, and he's a veteran, and he can step up and play some games, but is it really worth it for you to be playing a lot of Dylan Carlson? I'd rather just Carlson stay as a reserve outfielder, and I'd give Dylan Beavers, call him up from AAA, give him his first chance, a little run, Beavers, Kerstad, Mullins outfield, and see how it goes. I mean, it'd be a good time to give him a chance. He's been pretty solid in AAA so far this year. He's one of your top 10 to 15 prospects. Like, maybe it gives you an opening there, but I just hope Laureano's okay, because he's one of the only guys who is hitting right now. Speaking of hitting, third thing you need to know from this one is that Ryan Mountcastle did have 2 hits in this game. And after the second hit, they were both singles. It upped his batting average to 292 in the month of May. And Mountcastle had a horrific April. So it's really good to see him hitting 292 in May, but it's been a pretty empty 292. 13 of his 19 hits have been singles. The other 6 have been doubles. He's hitting for no power. He only has 2 home runs this year. They both came in April. And it's an OPS under 700 despite a batting average just under 300. He's hitting what I would call an empty 292. Like, yeah, he's getting singles, but they're not really helping the team. He's still hitting the ball hard. He had a hard hit rate in this month of over 50%. That's really good to see, but he's not hitting the ball in the air. He's not pulling the ball in the air. It was all the issues Mountcastle was having last season as his stats just dropped lower and lower, and he became just less and less of a power hitter, and that is continuing. And, it's better to hit 292 than 192. That's certainly been nice to at least have some hits to show for it in the month of May. But, man, oh, man, he's just a completely different player than he was. And I am still going to say that the vertigo issues he was dealing with dating back to 2023, I mean, have to be causing something here, but he's a completely different hitter. They changed the wall, didn't change Ryan Mountcastle, just hitting for no power. Yeah, he plays a good defensive first base, and yeah, he's hitting some singles, but it's an empty offensive profile. Like, yeah, 292 average is nice, but he is a power hitter, or at least he was. I don't even know if he is anymore. There's no identity for him as a hitter right now. And it's confusing to watch. Again, it's nice to see him have a 2-hit game, but he needs to be mashing the baseball like we know he can when he had a 30-plus home run season 4 years ago. And that's just not the player he is anymore. And it continues to be frustrating in a different way this year, but still frustrating because overall the April was so bad. It's been a bad offensive season for Ryan Mountcastle. Now, speaking of that offense, fourth thing you need to know from Tuesday's loss is that the offense did try to mount a little bit of a rally late, just as they did on Monday, but it was not enough. Remember, Cedric Mullins had that game-tying 3-run homer in the 7th inning on Monday. Orioles, of course, gave up a run in the 8th and lost 5-4. Well, this one they were trailing 3-0, and then they rallied a little bit in the 7th. They got back-to-back singles to start the inning. Of course, Heston Kjerstad grounded into a double play, but then Ramon Arias poked in an RBI single to make it 3-1. Jackson Holliday followed it up with an RBI triple to make it a 3-2 game. Couldn't tie it, but then Dylan Carlson had a hit in the 8th to try and rally. They couldn't come back there, and then it was too little too late. And again, it's just a bunch of nothing from the offense. It was good to see Holliday rip a ball off the wall to get a triple. That was nice, but that was the Orioles, at least at this point. They're still in the bottom of the 8th as I'm watching. Their only extra base hit of the 8 hits that they got. Like, singles are okay, but 7 singles and 2 walks, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. I mean, Arias, Carlson, Henderson, Rutschman all had hits. Holliday had the triple, as I mentioned. It's hard to watch them try to hit. It's hard to watch them try to pitch. It's hard to watch them in general right now. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' loss on Tuesday night to the Brewers, which is now 5-2 Milwaukee in the bottom of the eighth inning. This game seems to be certainly over at this point. Is that Felix Bautista pitched in the eighth inning with the Orioles trailing 3-2 heading the bottom of the eighth. Felix Bautista came out of the Oriole bullpen. Now, he hadn't pitched since that debacle Friday night, so it had been 3 days off for him. He definitely needed some work. But it's the first time this year he has not pitched in the ninth with the game either tied or with the Orioles in the lead. And Bautista had been used very sparingly, only 13 appearances in the Orioles' first 46 games of the year. I mean, that would be unheard of with the ways that the Orioles were using Bautista back in 2022, and then especially at kind of the height of his powers in 2023. And it's interesting because this is the first time Tony Mansolino, as interim manager, has brought in Felix Bautista. He last pitched Friday night and didn't cover the bag in time and didn't throw home in time and gave up the run in the top of the ninth inning. That was Brandon Hyde's final game. He was fired the next morning after that debacle of a loss to the Nationals. And it's the first time Mansolino's been able to use Bautista. And you could argue, hey, he had 3 days without pitching. It's a close game in the eighth. Yeah, it's not a save situation, but it's a good time to get Bautista some work. And it also could help you because, hey, he's your best reliever. You at least can hopefully be able to keep it at a 3-2 game, give your offense a chance with just a one-run deficit in the top of the ninth inning. Like, those could have all been plausible reasons why the Orioles went to Bautista. And it's so few spots to use him with all the losing. And the Orioles are trying to be careful, right? They're trying to balance staying away from back-to-back games and staying away from multi-inning outings. The Orioles said it at the beginning of the year with him coming off Tommy John surgery. They're just not going to do those things for the first couple of months, and then they would kind of see how it was going and evaluate from there for the rest of the season. And we're getting towards the end of May. We're kind of getting towards the end of that evaluation period, so maybe the Orioles were open to doing a little bit more with Bautista, but it was the first time since July 31st of 2023 that he had entered a game before the ninth inning. And you rarely see him ever come in with the Orioles losing. Like, the O's played enough winning baseball in 2022 and 23. There just wasn't a lot of spots once he really, in the second half of 22, got into fully the closer role where he just needed to get work and hadn't pitched in a big spot where he just needed to pitch in a game to stay fresh. So I guess it could be seen as aggressive managing, trying to keep it a 3-2 game and use Bautista, who hadn't worked a lot. But I mean, of course it didn't work out. He gives up a leadoff homer to Rhys Hoskins. It's immediately 4-2. He doesn't have as good command. He gets a line out, then a walk, then a strikeout. Then, I mean, the Joey Ortiz single that Jackson Holliday throws over Mountcastle's head allows a run. The Orioles kick the ball around later in the inning. Bautista throws 26 pitches. They take him out of the game because they don't want to overdo it. Cionel Perez did come in and keep it at 5-2, which is what it was when Bautista left. But like, everything's a disaster right now. Ramon Laureano's playing great. Gets his cleat stuck, drops a fly ball, gives up another run. Bautista's been your one consistently good reliever. Has the mental lapse Friday night. You put him in a weird spot, he's a disaster, and the game gets blown open in the eighth inning Tuesday. It's like everything that can go wrong does. And again, they're heading to the top of the ninth right here in a 5-2 game. I'm going to guess that's going to be the final score and the eighth consecutive loss for the Baltimore Orioles. And I think we can all agree at this point, the O's, still possible, it still may, but the O's are probably not digging out of this hole now 17 games under 500 and finding a way to get to the postseason. So this year, kind of a lost season. What's next? How do you make sure this doesn't carry over into the next year and the next year and really tank this organization? First, it starts with finding out what you have in some of your young guys. We're going to talk about how the O's should split up some of that playing time with the younger hitters and the younger pitchers. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And I think what's really cool about Monarch Money is it gives you this all-in-one convenience. Instead of having to juggle multiple apps with multiple different financial plans on them, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals, all on the same app. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So for the Orioles, again, currently down 5-2 in the top of the ninth inning in Milwaukee. It seems like they're headed towards their 8th consecutive loss to go to 15-32 on the season. I would love to be wrong, but here, Wednesday, May 21st, 2025, I am sticking a fork in the 2025 Orioles. They're done. They're cooked. It's over. I don't think they're going to finish the season 17 games under. I think they have a run in them at some point, but I just think this hole that they've dug themselves is way, way too large to get out of it and get back to the postseason. Like, people keep saying the Nationals. The Nationals were 19-31, and then they turned things on. The Orioles have already hit loss number 32, and they only have 15 wins. It doesn't happen for teams with 15 and 32 records. No matter how talented they can be, no matter how injured they are with, guys hopefully soon coming back to make this team better. The hole is too large. And again, I think they're going to play better baseball for the final 4 months of this season. It would kind of be hard not to. But at this point, it's just going to be so difficult to turn it around fully and get to the postseason, let alone just get back to 500 at some point. You would think at least 86 wins to be a postseason team. It's again, I would love to be wrong, but it just feels like it's not going to happen. So with that being the case, what's next? Like, how do the Orioles treat this season? Because they're not going into a full rebuild. They still have so much young talent. They have a team and a roster that can absolutely turn it right back around and compete and get back to the postseason in 2026. There is no doubt in my mind about that. So how do they make sure that this year doesn't get too off the rails and doesn't kind of ruin things for the next couple of seasons? Well, first, they need to find out what they have in some of their young players and how they can contribute. There needs to be guys who get a longer look this year. Let's start with the pitching side, because there are certainly openings in that rotation. Brandon Young has already made 2 starts for the O's this year, currently on the AAA injured list with a shoulder issue. But if he can be healthy, I'd like to see at least 10 healthy starts from Brandon Young in the big leagues this year. Kind of see what he has to offer. And hopefully the shoulder issue doesn't hold him out, and he can absolutely do that. Cade Povich, it's been an up and down season so far after a really good end to 2024. He should just, as long as he's healthy, be in the rotation all year. Unless the Orioles, they might want to skip a start, shut him down for a little bit, make sure it doesn't get too crazy on innings. But for most of, if not all this year, Cade Povich should easily get to, let's say he should make 25 starts for the Orioles this year. He should be in this rotation for most of the year to really see what you have in him. Chase McDermott pitches on Tuesday. There's still an opening in that rotation. Keep him in there. Allow him to start that game Sunday in Boston and just keep him in there, right? Trevor Rogers, I want to see also 10 starts from him. Find out if adjustments are going to work, or find out maybe if you need to move him into the bullpen in the second half and see if that can work for him, because he is still under contract until after the 2026 season. So you would still have him next year. See what you've got there. The relievers, right? Cade Stroud, we saw him make his major league debut on Sunday. He's back in AAA, but he's on the 40-man. Let's see 15 to 20 big league relief appearances from him this year. Let's see how good that stuff is. Colin Selby, also on the 40-man, kind of fined by the Orioles last year. Also in that same boat. Let's see some more appearances this year to see if he can be a long-term bullpen piece. And there are guys on the hitting side. Now, there's probably going to be less chances to go around for the younger position players, but there are guys that need to get looks. Kobe Mayo just needs some consistent playing time. I don't care if he struggles. I give him a month in the big leagues, play some third, play some first, have him do some DHing, and just a month straight where he's in the lineup, 5 out of 6 days every week, 6 out of 7 days every week, where he's pretty much an almost every single day player, and you're getting a look at him. It doesn't have to happen right now. It can happen in July or August or whenever you want to do it, but it has to happen this year, where he gets at least a month of runway where he can push, 70 something plate appearances in a month, and we can really start to get a sample size. And if that month goes truly terrible, you can send him back down to AAA if you want. But it's just, if they're going to be out of this, it is going to be the absolute best time to get some true runway for Kobe Mayo in the big leagues and allow him to figure this thing out. Of course, the Orioles, Abner Uribe strikes out the side of the top of the ninth. There's your final. Brewers 5, Orioles 2. They have officially lost their 8th consecutive game. It's cooked. It's over. This sucks, but it's over. So we got to move to what's next. I mean, I'm not fully sold on the outfielders Judd Fabian and Dylan Beavers in AAA right now, but get him a look. Like, both of them are Rule 5 eligible this offseason. The decision would need to be made whether or not to place them on the 40-man roster. Like, if Ramon Laureano is about to go onto the injured list with his ankle issue, Judd Fabian's kind of, I believe, away from the AAA team right now, dealing with a personal matter. But Dylan Beavers, like, get him up to the bigs, even if it's just for a couple of weeks now. This is a chance. If we can get 50 to 100 big league plate appearances from each of those guys, that would be great. Even just 50 to get a little look at those guys. And then Samuel Basayo, like, it's probably going to be more of a September call-up situation for the O's top prospect, but he's finally back to catching in AAA. He's over the hamstring and the elbow issues he was dealing with early in the season. Get him 40, 50 plate appearances in September. Let him work out some early issues. Let him go through some struggles that can hopefully lead to some 2026 big league success for him, because I think he's going to be a big part of this team next year. Even this counts with Heston Kjerstad. That dude has been terrible this year, but he's still going to be a big part of this future. Just let him continue to work through it, get the ABs, see if he can figure things out. Those are the important things, right? There is talent. There's big league ready talent that they can get a look at. And some of these guys, they're going to get a look at and realize they're not future pieces. And that's helpful too. It's not just helpful to be like, oh, we gave Dylan Beavers 100 plate appearances and he was awesome, and now we know he can truly help us in 2026. It's okay if you give a bunch of innings to Brandon Young this year and you realize he might be more of a reliever. Or Chase McDermott, for example. You give him 15 starts and you're like, he's probably more of a future reliever. That's okay. I think he has a future as a really good reliever. But if you figure that out now, you can come in ready to go with him in the bullpen on opening day next year. Like, these are the things that are going to help you moving forward. You can still turn this kind of season into a developmental positive and be ready to turn it back around and be a winning team again in 2026. But the other part of this is going to be the trade deadline. I think it's pretty clear. The Orioles aren't going to do a fire sale. They're not going to rebuild, but they are going to be sellers at the 2025 trade deadline. The question is, who would they deal? Let's talk about that to finish off the show, coming up next. So I think it's safe to say the Orioles at least probably won't be buyers at the deadline, and there's a good chance they'll be sellers. Now, again, let's get this straight. They are not rebuilding. This is a team that I think is going to sell off some of their rental pieces, get some younger guys, try and retool this roster, and go right back at it in 2026. There is too much talent in the big leagues in this system to not go and do that. They are not rebuilding. Let me say this again. I'm getting a lot of comments about this. They are not going back into a rebuild. It would be stupid to do that. You have too much talent. They're going to try and wipe this, learn from this, and go back at it in 2026. You can still be sellers at the deadline this year and be a winning ball club trying to win a World Series in 2026. But if they are sellers this year, the Orioles have some rentals. And if they're going to play these young guys I talked about, they're going to have to clear some space from some of those veterans who are currently on the roster. And there are some guys on expiring deals who could bring back some stuff at the deadline. At the very least, you're going to look to trade these expiring contracts. First is Zach Eflin. As long as Sunday's terrible start is not a sign of something, like, I would try to extend Zach Eflin. I love Zach Eflin. I've made it very clear. I think he's a perfect guy to have in this rotation. I'd give him a 3-year, $65 million deal like that to extend him through 2028. But the Orioles may not want to do that. If they don't, you got to trade him at the deadline. Because if he's pitching like normal Zach Eflin for the next couple of months, he could command, even with him just being a rental and a team getting him for 2+ months, he could command a lot. And the earlier you trade a guy, the more you can get back for him, because the more time that new team is going to have him. So you could trade Eflin on July 1st and get an extra month out of him and get an extra prospect out of him or something. But that could be a guy who you trade that could change another team's rotation and could get the Orioles back something serious. Tomoyuki Sugano, also a rental. Now, he's a very interesting case because, just coming over from Japan this year on a 1-year deal. He's 35. Even though the stats have been great, teams are probably worried about the peripherals and the low strikeout rates, like worried about, will Sugano be able to keep this up over a full season? Could be tough for him moving to the States to then be traded and move to another city halfway through the season. Like, that's all stuff you got to think about if you're another team trading for him. Sugano's another guy that I would maybe try to get a short extension out to, like a 2-year deal. But if they can't, and he's still pitching well near the deadline, you got to look to try and move him and get something back. I mean, they're kind of rebuilding Charlie Morton's value right now. Maybe you could get something for him if you rebuild it enough where he is back into your rotation and pitching at least okay by the time we get to midseason. Turn to the bullpen, like Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto. yes, it's up and down, but they're both rentals. They both have great stuff. They have both pitched well in the postseason early in their careers with the Phillies. I mean, hell, the Phillies have some bullpen issues. The Phillies might want both of those guys back. That would be an interesting deal, but teams are going to absolutely 100% trade for Dominguez and Soto. The Orioles can kind of shop them around and, price out deals against certain teams that are always looking for bullpen help. Those are guys that are definitely going to be dealt. And Andrew Kittredge as well. Like, he's pretty soon going to be back from his rehab assignment, back from the knee surgery he got in spring training, the veteran reliever the Orioles signed this year. If he pitches for the next 2 months and shows that he is healthy, the O's are absolutely going to deal him too, because someone's going to want a veteran, good reliever, setup man type like Andrew Kittredge. Move to the hitting side. The O's have some guys to move as well. Cedric Mullins. I mean, I would absolutely extend Mullins for another 2 years to keep him around, but I don't think the O's want to do that. I think they're fine to let him walk. And again, if they're going to be this bad, he's on an expiring contract. He's playing really well this year. I think they're going to be totally fine to try and deal him at the deadline. There's not usually a lot of good, everyday, true center fielders available at a trade deadline. If a team needs a center fielder, Phillies, another time the Phillies are coming up here, they might be willing to pay a bit of a higher price to get a player like Cedric Mullins at the deadline. The Orioles should certainly explore that. Ryan O'Hearn's an interesting one. Like, last 3 years, 124 WRC plus since joining the Orioles. Only Gunnar Henderson has been a better Orioles hitter in that span since O'Hearn came over to start 2023. And he's starting to hit lefties a little bit better. He's chasing less. He's striking out less. I'd love to have Ryan O'Hearn back. He's been a very important bat for the Orioles for 3 years. And OPS-wise, he has been their best hitter so far in 2025. So that would hurt even more to lose him. Not sure how much he would bring back, because teams still see him as a big side of the platoon bat. It's still a tough decision whether or not he can hit lefties, but he could help somebody, and teams are going to want him. There's going to be some interest there. It's just going to be more about, do we get the right price for a guy who's maybe worth more to us than he would be to another team? I mean, as long as Ramon Laureano is not seriously injured, he's swinging it well. Someone will want him to add to their bench. And there's Gary Sanchez, and maybe no one will want him. He'll probably just be the Orioles' backup catcher if he does ever get healthy. And then there are some guys who, have more team control, who might bring back more. Ryan Mountcastle's an interesting case. He has a year and a half of control. He's not a free agent until after 2026, but he has just a 67 WRC plus. Trading him would open way more time for Kobe Mayo, but he's just been so bad he wouldn't be able to be the main piece in a deal. It'd probably have to be Mountcastle and something else you're trading away. I think a couple relievers that would be interesting. Brian Baker, he's out of options, but he's got a lot of team control. You could capitalize and kind of sell high on his great season so far. Yennier Cano, I know it's been a little bit of a struggle lately, but teams would absolutely want him. He's got 3.5 years of team control, and teams will pay for good, consistent, controllable relievers, and that's what Cano has been. This would be a good option to try and get something back. And even Keegan Aiken, he's got a year and a half of control, still has options, pretty good lefty, gives you length, could free up space in the bullpen. A team would absolutely want to add Aiken to their pen as well. So there are some guys you could go and get, and the O's are going to get a plethora of different kind of players back in these deals. But again, you are shooting to be a contending team again immediately in 2026. In these deals, you're not looking for 19-year-olds in low A who are kind of lottery tickets who could help you in 4 years. You're looking for guys who are at the very lowest are in double A and probably have had some triple A time, who you think have a chance to at some point help you in 2026. And maybe that means you get less of a quantity of prospects, but you look for the higher quality of guys closer to the big leagues, where you can flip guys specifically looking for pitching that is closer to the big leagues if you can get it, if you are going to deal these guys away. This is not to say all those players are going to be traded. They're not going to find the right deal for all of them. They're going to hold on to some of them for whatever reason. Hopefully they extend some of them, like an Eflin or a Mullins or whomever, or Sugano, or whoever it may be. I really hope they extend at least one of them during the season. But some of those guys are going to be dealt because teams are going to come asking. And again, it's a weird spot for the O's because they're thinking, hey, we're going to be good next year. This year might just be a wash. And that is how they should think about this going into the deadline. But that doesn't mean they should be scared away from trading some of these rentals. Even if they held on to them, they're not going to re-sign them all. You want to get something for them. And especially when this season, again, just 17 games under. I mean, honestly, watching this team right now, it feels like they're never going to win again. Obviously they are. We're in May, but it's real bad. It is real, real bad. They are going to be sellers at the deadline. They're not going to make the postseason. It's about making the best of the rest of 2025, get the young guys in there, trade away some of the veterans, recoup some value into your farm system, guys that are closer to the big leagues, and try and just, hey, have a strong finish to the year. Even if you're not getting the playoffs, have a good August, good September, hopefully roll things into 2026. Because, I mean, Mike Elias finally spoke to the media for the first time before Tuesday's game since they fired Brandon Hyde. And not the way Elias usually talks, a lot more negative about things going on. But it's just all a disaster right now. Everything is just a disaster in Birdland. They've also lost 8 games in a row. That's a disaster. Let's just win a baseball game. Can we win a baseball game, please? Tomoyuki Sugano's on the mound. It's a 1:10 p.m. game, little daytime baseball. Let's see a win. Like, Sugano was only okay in his last start. Just give me a good start, Tomo. Just give it to me. I need to see them win a baseball game. The 26-year-old righty, Chad Patrick, that's a made-up player. That is a creative player, made-up name. You're in franchise mode. It's 2047, and you got a guy named Chad Patrick. It's either that or he's a Division I lacrosse player at Loyola. There's no way Chad Patrick is a major league pitcher. But apparently he's made 10 starts with a 3.35 ERA for the Brewers, and he basically throws all fastballs. The Orioles have had trouble hitting fastballs this year, so we will see how that goes. Please, Orioles, can we please win a baseball game? Please, I'm begging you. We suffered through 19 straight losses back in 2021. This 8-game losing streak is their longest since then. Let's not let it get anywhere close to 19. We know you're probably not going to make the playoffs. Let's try and at least win some games so we can be happy some nights, and I can be a little happier when I'm hosting this podcast. But either way, win or lose, I'm going to be back tomorrow. We'll be recapping the final game of the series between the Orioles and the Brewers as the O's look to end the losing streak. We'll talk a little bit more about the updates to Colton Cowser and others on the injury front, and discuss a little bit more Mike Elias's comments regarding the Brandon Hyde firing that he gave to the media on Tuesday. But that's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.